Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Today we have yet another brand new steam loco from Hornby. Today's model is unique in my collection because it's a model of a prototype that doesn't exist. The prototype will exist and it's well on its way to completion. It's going to be finished in a couple of years as I understand it, but at the moment the model exists in its entirety before the real thing, which I think is fascinating and it is a unique situation. So the loco is this. It is a new Hornby P2 Prince of Wales. Now of course I have already looked at a Hornby P2, that was the new streamlined one a couple of weeks ago, and I'll pop a link up there if you'd like to see it. But this is a different kind of P2 without the streamlined front, and the model is therefore different enough that I've justified a separate review of this. This is also the same flavour of P2 that Hornby has produced in the past under the railways and railroad range, and people have been asking me what's the difference between the new P2 and the old ones, and I'm hoping to answer that question in this video, which is another reason why I wanted to look at this version of the new P2. So again, this is a very expensive model from Hornby. The price is the same as the streamlined one at £254.49 RRP, or at the retailers you can get it for around £230. This one yet again came from Derails at an even better price because I pre-ordered early and got it at the original price before Hornby increased them. So cannot wait to see what this model is like. This is kind of your classic OG P2, so in a way I'm almost looking forward to this one more than I was the last one. So let's see what Hornby managed to do with it, and let's see which is the best between this and the streamlined one. Let's go. So despite this being in an Era 3 LNER livery, Hornby do not actually advertise this as an Era 3 locomotive because of course it's a modern rebuild of an Era 3 locomotive. So Hornby call this an Era 11 loco, which is quite interesting, but they have produced an Era 3 LNER version of this same model, so if that's more your cup of tea, go check it out. In fact, there's quite a choice of different P2s between this and the streamlined one, and I've got some affiliate links in the description if you're interested. But anyway, yeah, the new box design, nice sturdy box. Let me show you the end of this box. So the product code I've got is R3983. It is the LNER Class P2 282 Prince of Wales, for that is the name of the new build P2, and it's number 2007. This is DCC ready and it needs a 21-pin DCC decoder. Let me show you the front of the box because there's a brief history of the P2 here. The bottom paragraph says, this Hornby Class P2 model includes a die-cast chassis and running plate. And the streamlined P2 that I looked at last time said exactly the same thing, which proved to be false. The running plate was not die-cast, it was plastic. Quite misleading. So I actually got in touch with Hornby to ask them about this, and they clarified that that was a mistake and that that was just a generic piece of copy which was included on both P2 models. It was actually just supposed to be included on this one, which does apparently have a die-cast running plate. Now this is the same price as the streamlined one, so does that mean that this model is going to be heavier and higher quality? Yes, possibly. Also, at the time of filming this review, even though Hornby admitted to me that that piece of copy was a mistake, they haven't made any public statement on their social medias or whatnot to clarify and clear up that mistake, which I guess means they're happy for that mistake to continue to mislead customers of the streamlined P2. So I think Hornby could do more to spread the word about their mistake, especially given the fact that they have made misleading mistakes like this recently in the past. Anyway, yeah, nice packaging. Let's get this out and see what this model is like. So let's lift the lid. Another incredibly expensive model, but if it does have the die-cast running plate, then I would consider this to have more features than the one I looked at last time, like I say, for the same price. And there it is, the Hornby P2 in the original condition without the streamlined end. I've only ever seen Hornby's old model of this version of the P2, so this will be my first time seeing this, which is very exciting. So let's pull out the clamshell there. Yeah, quite a heavy thing, this. Right, we'll look at that in a moment. Let's have a look at the instructions then, and I'm going to be quite brief with these because I did look at this last time. So class P2, lubrication, removing the tender body to chip it. Accessories, these do come with painted crew, which is awesome. And then you've got some information on how to fit the various accessories if you want to. And then on the back, you've got a brief explanation of the new coupling system, which allows you to just push the loco and tender together and then disconnect them easily as well. So that's the lowdown on those. Let's now open up the new P2. And let's have a look at what accessories we get. I assume it's going to be reasonably similar to the last Hornby P2 I looked at. And yeah, it certainly looks like it. We've got a very, very full detail bag here. This time we do have guard irons, I notice. I think the streamlined version had those missing by mistake. Hopefully Hornby will be replacing those for those that want them. We've got nameplates here which do look etched, but they're not as good as those ones we saw from Acura scale. They don't really have that high shine to them. In fact, they do just look like they've been painted, but it is nice to have separate nameplates rather than just printed ones, which is good. Screw link couplings included, a flanged axle included, and I do love those painted figures. I think that's such a great upgrade for Hornby. Okay, so lots of detail to fit, but let's have a look at the loco. The finish and the decoration was incredible on the streamlined version, so hopefully the same will be true of this one. So here we go. Time to unwrap. Oh my word, yeah. Oh, I love this thing. Look at that. Yeah, hopefully that comes across on camera. Noticeably a huge improvement over Hornby's old P2. Yeah, the finish, the quality of the decoration, even the colour, I would say, looks to be a big improvement, and I will do a side-by-side comparison later on. Okay, so the loco and tender are connected on these usually. Yeah, that's true. So let's lift both of them out and let's have a proper close look. So there it is, the Hornby P2 Prince of Wales, a loco that doesn't exist completely yet in real life, but it does exist in model form, and this thing looks beautiful, it really does. And sure enough, at long last, the running plate is die-cast this time. And as a result, the model feels like it's much better quality. I've got the cold hard metal against my fingers. This feels more like a £250 model than the streamlined version did. Whether it's any heavier or not, we will have to see. I'm going to pop this on the scales and find out in just a second. And of course, we're also going to have a much closer look at this loco's details and also how it differs with the old Hornby Railroad P2. For now though, let's have a bit of background on the P2 in real life. The LNER P2 was first introduced in 1934 to the design of Sir Nigel Gresley, and as you can tell, it's quite an unusual locomotive due to its lens rotary cam valve gear and the wheel configuration, which was 282, optimised of course for heavy express work, and these locos hauled very heavy trains over the difficult and hilly terrain of Scotland. From 1936, the P2s were given streamlined fronts like the A4s, and we saw that last time. The P2 design was a great success. They did haul those heavy trains with impressive acceleration and pretty good speeds as well, until the Second World War came along. Obviously, the war made things difficult for the railways, and there were concerns over maintaining such a non-standard locomotive, and so ultimately the P2 was rebuilt by Edward Thompson in 1943, and like the Hush Hush, the P2 then became a much more conventional and unremarkable looking loco at the end of it. Today, no original P2 remains under preservation, but this locomotive, Prince of Wales, is a locomotive in our future and not in our past for a change. Due to be complete in 2025 at a cost of £6 million, it is an all-new P2 being built by the A1 Locomotive Trust to be the 7th P2 ever created. So let's talk about weight. Here we have the new Hornby P2, the one I've just unboxed, and here we have the Railroad Hornby P2, which is still available on hornby.com for £127.49 RRP. That is more or less exactly half the price of the new Hornby P2. So let's see how they compare on weight. So I'm going to weigh the new Hornby P2 first with its die-cast running plate. So here we go. and that weighs in at 486 grams there, so reasonably heavy. That is actually heavier than the streamlined end P2 that I looked at last week. That's 448 grams there, so approximately 40 grams lighter than the die-cast running plate P2, which we've got, which is good. But what about the Hornby Railroad P2? Let's put that on with its tender too. And that is 498 grams, 499 even. So this, half the price, Hornby Railroad P2 is still heavier than Hornby's new one, which is quite surprising, isn't it? Because the Railroad version does not have a die-cast running plate. This one does. Somehow it is still lighter. But hey, at least it's got the die-cast running plate now, which is a worthwhile upgrade on quality over the Railroad version. Of course, it also means that Hornby are now delivering what they promised on the box, unlike the streamlined version, which also promised it but did not deliver. So this one's better for the customers, they're getting what they paid for, and I guess it's also better for Hornby from a legal point of view as well, because I'm pretty sure there are laws against misleading your customers by promising something on the packaging that is then blatantly not delivered on the product. And I trust Hornby will clear up the confusion they've caused there in due course. On the subject of the running plate, you can see there's also quite a bit of detail on this in terms of rivets and such. The decoration on this new Hornby P2 is also outstanding. The finish is a lot better than on the Railroad version, a far more sort of satin finish, which reflects the light in a more pleasing way. And there's also a lot more complexity in the lining here. The Railroad version does have the boiler lining, which of course the new version has, and it looks excellent as well. But the new version also has lining around the cab and the windows and such, which the Railroad version actually missed off. Those areas look much more basic. The underframe is also lined very precisely on the new version, and on the Railroad version, again, this lining is missed off. Same thing with the cylinders as well, which have been fully painted up, not the case on the Hornby Railroad version. Here's a look at the Prince of Wales nameplate, which is beautifully painted. There's a great finish on that, and if you wanted a bit more relief on that nameplate, like I say, there are etched ones included, which is great. You've also got the highly detailed wheels, which look again a lot better than the Railroad ones, which didn't have any of the lining on them, and somehow they managed to get the centres of the wheels to be a different colour from the rest, so these look much better. The valve gear still doesn't look very good though. The rotary cam section is still very blatantly plastic, which contrasts with the metal of the rest of the rods. And clearly none of this valve gear is actually going to work and move, which stings a little bit at £250 RRP, but I do think the lack of movement here is probably quite reasonable, but I think a bit of metal down here would have also been better, because this is particularly flimsy and plasticky looking. Elsewhere on the model there are massive upgrades. I mean, the turning wheels and other details on the running plate are now separately fitted and picked out. That wasn't the case on the Railroad version. The pipework now is all separately fitted as well, not just a part of the moulding as it was before. Here's a look at the Railroad version of that. It looks absolutely fine, but I think the separate pipework does stand out a lot better. The lubricators and such on the running plate are now all separate as well, as opposed to being just a part of the moulding. Like the streamlined P2, we've also got separately fitted wire handrails, which are very, very fine. And for the first time, we also have wire handrails on the cab, which are separately fitted, of course. On the Railroad version, the cab handrails were actually just a part of the moulding, which obviously, again, didn't look quite as good. The buffer beams are decorated well, but quite sparsely detailed out of the box, although you have more detail to add here if you want. You have got the painted vacuum pipes pre-fitted, and the buffers, which are made of metal this time, and are also sprung. This is also a massive upgrade over the Railroad version, which did have metal buffers, but they were not sprung. So again, this is much better. We've got separately fitted lamp brackets here. You've got the full detail on the smoke box door, which looks excellent. Full hinge detail and such, also nicely painted. Again though, we've just got a plastic whistle, which looks a little bit naff on such an expensive model. This whistle is not so fine that it couldn't have been turned out of metal, as the safety valves have been. I mean, look at the quality of the finish on those safety valves, and then compare it to the whistle. There's no comparison really, is there? Safety valves much better. You've got a similar cab to the streamlined version with the opening vents. That looks absolutely excellent. Around the other side, we've got even more detail on the running plate, although it's not been done that well here. See these little parts? Instead of creating a tooling for a mirror image of this part, they've just created one and turned this one around, and that means the moulding marks are visible, and there's also less detail. If I pan across to the other one, yeah, you can see there's a lot more detail here on the one on the right, because this one's just been flipped around. So perhaps a little bit of laziness here in the way the model's been put together, but it is only noticeable when you're looking very closely, but noticeable nonetheless. The body detailing looks excellent as well. There is a lot of riveting on the body, all of it very fine looking. I like that a lot. And let's take a look at the cab, which has the running number on the side as well as a nicely printed builder's plate. Similar glazed windows as before, and also a similar interior detail which looks excellent. Painted gauges, lots of picked out pipework, the separate seats, metal tender full plate, cab doors pre-fitted. It's the full works, and of course it also has the firebox glow effect. This is all a huge improvement over the railroad version, which does have cab detail, but none of this is picked out, and the detail is a little bit chunkier inside here as well, and it doesn't have the proper seats for the crew, nor did it include crew of any kind either. Beneath the cab, we've got the flangeless pony design, and let's just test whether this one is on the track. Yep, you can see the spokes turning past there. So while the pony is not ultra realistic, again, it is at least touching the track, so those wheels will turn somewhat realistically. Let's have a look at the tender then, which is very nicely presented as always from Hornby. Excellent decoration, lettering, and of course lining on the underframe, all done to a high standard. Around the front, you've got little gauges picked out. That is fantastic to see. Seems like a very high quality tender really. Coal load on the inside, separately fitted by the looks of it. Lots of detail around the water filler cap as well. And around the back, you've got separately fitted wire handrails, separately fitted lamp brackets, and also more sprung buffers and coupling hooks for you to fit your couplings onto. You've also got the rear coupling, which is NEM, not kinematic or anything, but it is nicely sprung so that it should handle curves okay. In terms of quality, sure, it's a very high quality model. The decoration is faultless, and obviously the die-cast running plate is a better quality feature than the plastic one we saw on the streamlined version. But there are one or two minor issues. I have noticed, for instance, there is some visible glue in areas, and there's those details over on the other side which haven't been produced to the highest standard, plus the plastic whistle. So while on the whole the quality is absolutely fine and pretty good in many ways, in other ways I feel like for £250 RRP this could have been improved a little bit, so those are some things to bear in mind. I think I would say this is my favourite of the P2s, and it's also extra special because this is the new build P2. It's very awesome to have a model of that. But how does this run? Obviously it's a little bit different mechanically. It doesn't have the Walschaerts valve gear, so I'd be interested to see if there are any other mechanical differences. I don't think there will be, but I think it's worth a look. So let's get it down onto the track and let's talk performance. So there she is, Prince of Wales, looking absolutely stunning down onto the track. The two Hornby P2s I've looked at have been very different, but of course the one thing they do have in common is that they are both just exquisite models to look at. Just look at this thing, it is crazy. Anyway, I've already filmed the initial performance test and I will show you how that went in just a second. After that, I went on and disassembled the loco just to show the mechanism, and while the two mechanisms are obviously going to be very similar, they are based on pretty much the same chassis, I am glad I still disassembled this one because there's a couple of interesting differences. So let's get into it. First of all, the pickups are pretty much the same as the streamlined version, so you've got all tender wheels picking up, which is great, and then the driving wheels on the loco also pick up, so again you've got 8 pickups per rail. That's more than enough, and it makes the loco very, very reliable. Here's another look at the drawbar, just in case you didn't see the other video. Yeah, no wires at all visible, although an interesting thing about this is that the connector supports 8 different connections, but only 4 are being used on these locos. That's 2 for the motor and 2 for the pickups. That means that the LED lights in the loco are not connected to the DCC board in any way, which means therefore they are not controllable via DCC. The lights are live to the track and they are always on, so do bear that in mind. The base keeper plate is very easy to remove. It's just a set of screws on the bottom, and that gives you full access to clean the pickups if you want to, and also to clean and lubricate the loco axles. The axles themselves, as always from Hornby, have the proper separately fitted bearings on them, which is a massive thumbs up. I love that feature. And then you've got the single geared axle on the right, and then you've got that light sensor for presumably synchronized sound or smoke on the left. No electronics connected up to this system here, but there is going to be a Prince of Wales which has smoke, and I assume this is what that is for. The body removal is a little different on this version of the P2 because there's just 3 screws to undo this time. Just 1 at the front, not 2, and then the same 2 at the back as before. And the chassis, it's the same die-cast chassis as we saw before, but it's a little bit different because of this. This is an enclosure for a smoke generator. Like I say, Hornby are producing a version of this model with smoke, and so this is an early look at what the smoke generator will look like. There is no hardware fitted inside this enclosure, but of course there will be on the versions with smoke, so that's quite interesting. This is the same 5-pole motor that we saw last time with that big chunky flywheel, a massive upgrade over the railroad version which just has a 3-pole motor which does not perform anywhere near as well as this does. And here are those LEDs which are live to the track, so basically regardless of whether the tender's even connected or whether you've got DCC in the tender, these lights will come on if there is power to the track. And then the gauge comes in at 14.2 to 14.4 millimeters, which is pretty close to the standard, and that does not cause any issues around curves or points or anything. So there you have it, a fantastic mechanism. It ticks all of the boxes and then some, and it gives us some interesting hints on some of the tech that Hornby are going to be bringing to this model in the future, which is quite exciting. But there you go, that is the mechanism. Now let's move back in time and let me show you how that first performance test went. So the streamlined P2 that I tested a couple of weeks ago was just incredible, one of the best performers I've ever seen. Was that just a fluke, or is this one going to be like it as well? Let's find out. Forwards direction. Does this work? Here we go. It does. And I have to say that remarkably smooth takeoff was very similar to the streamlined P2 that I looked at last time. So it would seem as though the performance is just as good on this. And already, if I cut it off, well, I was going to say you can see that flywheel action, but actually it's stopping quite abruptly, isn't it? But hopefully that will improve as the loco runs in. Let's have a look at the speed just to show how this one's running at 50 out of the box. Here we go. Yeah, seems to be exactly the same as the other P2 that I looked at. That's excellent. And even though this has not yet been running, what is the crawl like right out of the box? Let's find out. Let's ease this up very slowly and see. There we go. It's crawling, I think. Yeah. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Like I said last time, those new motors have done wonders for this Hornby mechanism, and I seriously hope that Hornby can get that motor into any of their future products. It's not a massive motor, and so it should be able to fit in locos a lot smaller than the P2. And just look at that. Look at the acceleration there. I mean, it's not even running yet, and it's marvellous. Now, I can already see that the firebox flicker effect is working, but because I suspect it is not connected up to the tender in any way, I'm actually going to disconnect the tender now. Ooh, does require quite some force, and then I can just put the loco on to full power, and yet sure enough, even without the tender, the lighting is flickering inside the cab. So I guess it's fair enough that the fire is always lit in a steam loco on your layout, but that does mean that as far as I can tell, you don't have the ability to switch that off on DCC. Okay, let's cut the power and let's put the tender back on. And I think with that, once these are coupled back together, I will run this loco in and just double check that it gets on okay around the track. So here we go, forwards 50%. Okay, not expecting any issues because it seems to be much the same as the other P2 I looked at, and sure enough, Yeah, it's performing beautifully. No real slowing down around the curves. Obviously, no derailments, no ill behaviour from that front pony truck. Seems to be the model performer, just like the streamlined one was. So, fantastic news, exactly as expected. Let's let this run in for the full time, 30 minutes forwards, 30 minutes backwards. Then let's do some more testing with it. Let's couple it up to some coaches, and we'll see how it gets on. All right, I'll see you shortly. Okay, that is running in complete. Sudden stop, and yes, we get that flywheel action now. So something has certainly loosened up inside the loco, and now it's even smoother than before. Looks great as it's running along, although again, it is a shame about the valve gear here. It doesn't look great, not as good as the other P2 anyway. But how is the performance now? What's the speed like? Let's see if that's changed in any way. So let's run past at 50. Here we go. Yeah, I'd say maybe it's a little bit quicker, but ultimately it's still a very sensibly geared loco. It doesn't run too fast, but if you turn it right up on the controller, it can do the high speeds, which is just what you want. What is the crawl like now? It was great before. Is it still good now that it's running? Let's just double check. Yeah, it's still impossibly slow, is how I'd describe it. Let's do a very smooth acceleration. Ooh, it's just wonderful, isn't it? And like I say, the Railroad P2 just had a 3-pole motor in it originally. Mine has been upgraded. I put a 5-pole in there, but yeah, let me tell you, that Railroad P2 would not have been doing this. So a lot of people have been asking, they've said, I've got the Railroad P2, or maybe the Railways version of the Railroad P2, which just had some extra paintwork on it. Is it worth the upgrade? Well, that depends. I mean, it's an awful lot of money. We're talking around twice the price. They're both impressive locos. They both look like P2s, but I have to say, in terms of looks, detail, performance, decoration, finish, most things really, mechanism, quality, I'm still listing them, I think this new version is quite a lot better. So if you've got the money to spend and you're a massive fan of the P2, then I think an upgrade would be very worthwhile. If you're not a big fan, if you just wanted a P2 back in the day because it's unusual and it will look cool on the layout, then, you know, maybe not. It's still a cool model, the Railroad one, that is. Maybe you don't need to spend twice as much money, you know, over £200 to get one of these new ones. Let me know what you think anyway, do comment down below. The pulling power is slightly better than the streamlined P2 because of the extra weight. So this one comes in at 0.52 newtons, which should allow it to haul 31 coaches as opposed to the 29 of last time on straight and level track. So to reflect that, I've put the same coaches that I used with the streamlined P2 onto the track, although I've added an extra one just to represent the additional pulling power. So let's go and couple up to those and let's just check that the coupling works. Should do though, because of course it did on the previous one. And this is the delightful thing about the Hornby P2. There is so much control here that you can back up to coaches and other rolling stock incredibly realistically with masses of control. I mean, look at this, look how slowly I'm doing this. I can stop, I can start up again at an incredibly slow speed, and the loco doesn't cut out, it doesn't hesitate, it doesn't stall. So let's leave it on like that, just look at that. It is ridiculous how well these locos can crawl, and that's 2 for 2, they're both like it. The large decoupling there struggling on the coach, but that's because it doesn't match the loco's couplings. So it's now coupled up to a relatively large train. Let's imagine that my Gordon's Hill is a hilly railway up in Scotland. Let's set this to about 40 something speed and let's see how it gets on. Well, it's managing them so far without any issues. So we'll catch up with that in just a second. I've got other Gresley locos elsewhere on the line, so see which ones you can spot, and there is an odd one out. Here is the Railroad P2, which obviously looks quite a bit different. This model did look a lot better once they added the extra decoration to it, as they did in the Railways range. But even that model, with the upgrades, not a patch on this new one. Yes, very, very impressive. And then on the inside line, we've got the star of the show from the last Hornby review, and that is of course the streamlined P2, which in a way is even more exciting because this is the first time that Hornby have ever done this version of the P2. Right, let's see how it gets on around the track. So the torque of the streamlined one was good, but it did struggle a bit round the curves, and yep, this one's doing the same. I should note that it's only struggling on the second radius curves. Anything broader does seem to be okay. However, it is rated for second radius, so I always test this stuff on second radius. And frankly, we've seen that Accurascale Class 37 traverse that second radius curve without any slowing down whatsoever, so it is possible. And of course that 37 was heavier. So I suppose that's the slight downside on the performance of these new Hornby P2s. Not the most impressive torque in the world, but I think the performance is otherwise so good that it's quite easy to overlook that. But overall, what do I think about this new Hornby P2? Well, the level of detail is very similar to the streamlined version, i.e. very, very good indeed. Except there's perhaps a little bit less finesse in this version because of the visible glue, the plastic valve gear, and some of those detail parts on the running plate which didn't look quite as good. But overall, it's still a fantastic looking model, and I think there's definitely no denying that. In terms of the quality, there is an improvement to the quality here in that the running plate is now die cast, and I do like to see that feature. And it's very much the kind of feature that you would expect having just paid over £200 for a new loco. The streamlined version didn't have that, but it also didn't have the visible glue that this one had. So there's not much net change in terms of quality. The mechanism and performance is pretty much the same. So I would say overall they're kind of equally good. Maybe the streamlined one is slightly better, but if you've got a particular preference for one over the other, I would say you're getting an equally good deal regardless of which one you go for. So yeah, they're both great. Get whichever one tickles your fancy. Now then, let's have some ratings on the Hornby P2 in original condition. I know this is the rebuild, but in terms of the model, this is going to be quite similar to the original condition P2. The detail I'm giving 4-star, I gave the streamlined version 5, but there are reasons why I'm going to knock this down for 1-star. First of all, the plastic valve gear. This just does not look great. It's one thing that it doesn't work or move, I think that's fair enough, but the fact that it looks so plasticky and it is so flimsy does let this down a little bit. You've also got a lack of finesse in some of the details across the running plate and also the plastic whistle. So these things together I think make up enough of an issue to knock this down by 1-star. Otherwise though, the detail is fantastic. The decoration is truly top notch. The cab detail is wonderful. There's loads of different separately fitted parts, and it's a huge step up of course from the original Railroad P2. Similarly, the performance is fantastic. It runs basically exactly the same as the streamlined version does. So really nice and smooth, good and quiet, lots of power, but some torque issues on the tighter curves, particularly second radius. It does say on the box that this is rated for second radius, so I would expect good performance across those. Must be said though, on the broader curves, this loco is fine, but other locos have performed better than this, so I'm not going to give it the full 5-star here either. Pulling power is slightly better than the streamlined P2 because of the extra weight, so whereas the streamliner could manage 29 coaches on straight and level track, this one could do 31, so that is an upgrade, more power on this version of the model. The mechanism though cannot be faulted in any way. This is a very, very high quality mechanism. You've got lots of pickups both on the tender and on the loco, proper bearings on the driving axles, really decent loco to tender connection, high quality 5-pole motor with a flywheel, very easy to access, very easy to service. It gets a massive thumbs up from me. The quality is 4-star for me. Overall, it has been very nicely put together, but on this example, there is a little bit of visible glue, which is not acceptable on a 250 quid model. However, this does have the die-cast running plate. The whole running plate isn't die-cast, the front is still plastic, but that is an upgrade, so there are aspects of the quality that are better and worse on this version of the model, so I've left it the same as I gave the streamlined version. Value for money though, it's the same price as the streamlined version, £254.49 at the RRP or $229 approximately at the retailers, yet you get more model with this version because of the die-cast running plate and the extra weight. So I gave 2.5 to the streamlined P2, this one is getting 3-star because you do get more for your money. Overall then, that is a very similar score of 7.84 out of 10, which is a grade of B. Yeah, that's very respectable. Into the ranking it goes. 15th place, below the streamlined P2. Yeah, just slightly weaker, I would say, in a few areas. A lot of that could be due to the build quality of my specific example though, and that is above the Rapido Hunslet 16-inch. So they're about the same. One isn't massively better than the other, so go for which one you want to. If the massive price doesn't put you off, I could recommend either of the new Hornby P2s. Well folks, that just about does it for yet another review of a fantastic new Hornby P2, and I think I can safely say we now have the ultimate P2 available in model form. The old railroad / railways ones, yeah, they were okay, but I was never 100% satisfied with those. They never quite offered the level of detail and quality that I think such a marvellous loco as the P2 really deserved. And now that's exactly what we've got. We've got a truly finessed set of models with lots of choices in terms of era and different versions. We never had that before. And they really are superb models. The quality on them is high. The performance is better than usual from Hornby. And while the prices are high as well, you do get what you pay for, I think, to a degree. I'm not saying the full price is necessarily worth it, but there are worse value models out there. And at least in this case, you do get a high quality model for your money, as opposed to a cheap and nasty hunk of junk for your money. So yeah, no major complaints from me really. They do get the thumbs up, and if you want to get one, I've got affiliate links down in the description. For now though, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you very, very soon. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.